Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to Behind the Book, a podcast for writers and readers. I'm here with my co-host, Karen McQuestion, and today we're excited because we are going to talk about marketing. It's just going to be the two of us. We had some requests for more of this kind of thing, so we're hoping that this will prove useful to others. So, Karen,
Tess,
tell us all about the 3 Ps.
Okay.
I'm so excited for the 3 Ps.
when I talk about promoting books or marketing books, I always say there are 3 components to it, and it's the 3 Ps. There's packaging, positioning, and promoting, which promoting is really technically marketing, but marketing doesn't start with a P. So for our purposes, it's packaging, positioning, and promoting. One thing that I've noticed with newer authors that are promoting their books is they tend to think, well, what did you do to get your book to do well? And they think it's like 3 things. But you and I know it's just a host of things, like a multi-pronged approach. It could be 15 things, and you could be doing 15 things for your book, and I could be doing 15, and we might only overlap 5 or 6 of them. So every book can use a different approach. What works for me might not work for you.
Absolutely. And there's genres and subgenres to think about too. So, and I think what you do learn over time, and this is if you have good books, I think that's like number one, is that your readers are in certain spots in the world. So your readers might not be my readers, and therefore the marketing needs to be tweaked in order to find those people. But in general, I think we have some good tips even regardless of genre.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say that most of these tips would be geared towards indie authors because they have more control, and with getting the higher royalty rate, they have more leeway for budgeting. But some of them would apply also to traditionally published authors as well. So in the first area, packaging, I consider that to be everything you would see on the Amazon page, the book cover, the description, any other content that you add. My thoughts on book covers are, it's pretty simple. The book cover should broadcast what the reader is getting. So they
no surprises.
Yeah. So they should be able to see at a glance. Oh, this is a mystery, or this is probably literary fiction or a romance, or, a good test is to show friends and say, what do you think this book is about? And if they think it's a book of poetry and it's a thriller, you have to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just to kind of I don't know if you were thinking of mentioning this too, but just doing the research in your genre or subgenre, what is selling? What do the covers look like? What are the blurbs like? And try to mimic that as much as possible.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can see what was successful for other authors and then follow their lead. It's funny because you think that readers would want something different, but really they seem to want something they can latch onto, like, oh, this is like that. And I enjoyed that.
Yes.
So I might also enjoy this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a mistake I made early on is I thought, oh, standing out is good. You want to be different. And that's actually completely the opposite. And for some reason, that was a hard one for me to get my head around. But yeah, it's like you say, you want that cover and that blurb to tell the reader exactly what they're getting so that when they open it up, they're pleased and therefore are happy and leave a good review. I think bad reviews come from when somebody thinks it's a certain type of book and it turns out it's not. So that element of surprise is not good in that case.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like you're making a promise to the reader and you don't want to break the promise. Do you have A+ content on your Amazon pages?
I do, although I don't have them on everything. I just really focused on kind of the first in series, but I'm kind of slowly working my way through them. I have a firm who does my graphics, and they're kind of working through them as we speak. But that's been a new change just in the last year, hasn't it? That indie authors have been able to use A+.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar with it, very often on a book page, it'll say from the publisher, and you can upload graphics that either describe the book or talk about you, or maybe it's a promotional tool, and I love it. Now, another author told me that some readers don't like it because when they are doing searches on phones, it's more for them to scroll through to get to the reviews.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that before, but I could see how it would be a little bit disruptive in that way. Although I am not a person normally who would look at reviews unless I was just curious about kind of, what were people saying about a certain subgenre or something. I choose on the blurb and the cover, and then I usually peek inside. And if that first page captures me, then I'm like, click.
So that brings us to the description. Do you have a philosophy about the blurb or description of the story?
I don't, other than I love what you have on your website. We've talked about it a little bit before. I think it's like the perfect way to think about it. And what I love about your brain is how you can take something that's kind of complex. In my opinion, it's complex. I hate writing blurbs. And kind of zero in on, okay, here's the 4 things you need to think about. And so anybody who hasn't gone over to Karen's website to check out her advice for writers section, the blurbs is right. I think it's the very first one. And she kind of goes through it. Do you want to just mention it again in case anybody has missed that from last time?
Sure, I'd be happy to. When I was first indie publishing, that was a huge problem for me, was how do you describe your story? And I've heard other authors say this as well. They can write the whole book, but when it comes to summarizing it in a way that's hooky or catchy, they would get stuck. And so I started to think, it can't be that hard. So I did what most people do, is look at other people's descriptions and tried to think of which ones grabbed me, and then what they had in common, why I found it compelling. And so then I finally decided to sort of write up a step-by-step process. And the first one is the introduction of the main character. So in my examples on my website, I used Harry Potter and the Da Vinci Code. And so the first step would be the ordinary world. So Harry Potter is orphaned, living with his aunt and uncle who treat him terribly. And then the second thing that it was introduced, and this was not me, this was the publisher, is the change or the happening, the big event. And in that case, an owl comes to the household to issue an invitation to Harry. And then the third one, it seemed like it got a little murkier. They would just say something like, Harry could only imagine what, a trip to a wizarding school, and I don't have it in front of me, so I don't remember exactly what it was, but they alluded to exciting events in sort of a vague and mysterious way. Because, and the reason for this is you don't want to tell the reader too much. It's like those previews for the movies that you feel like you watched the whole movie. You want to avoid doing that. You just want them to be intrigued. And then the last part is usually what I call a little bit of hype. Like, you don't want to miss this exciting adventure. Or I think with the Harry Potter one, they mentioned awards won. If you write kids' books, you could say it's geared for these ages, or people who like books by so-and-so will enjoy this book. And so when you break it down like that, it makes it easier to write. And that was why I did it. I was like, this isn't that hard. In my mind, I made it harder than it was.
Yeah, that's what I love about your kind of easy to follow thing. I will say, however, something that I've been really trying to do recently, and this would be more, I think, important for someone who writes really in a genre like I do, romance or mystery or suspense, whatever. Is to really try to get those keywords into your description, because when people search on Amazon for enemies to lovers romance, like that's the kind of thing they're going to put in their search engine. If that's in your blurb, then you're more likely to be shown that to a customer. So I think that's another thing to sort of think about.
Those algorithms that we all worship at the altar of
The
the algorithms.
mysterious- yeah.
We don't even
The
really know what
mysterious
they
algorithms.
are or what they do, but we've got to please them, you know? So that's the packaging of the book. A really terrific cover that's genre appropriate, a terrific description, and anything that you can put on the Amazon page. They have a section that authors can upload reviews. You can upload a little bio of the author. Just pay attention to how other authors do it. And that's very often how I get ideas. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. How did they do that?
Well, yeah, and then I think too, the conventional wisdom says that people often only read the first couple lines of your description. So if you can bold those, maybe, make them bigger, do whatever you need to do to kind of draw their eye to that and have that be as interesting and intriguing as possible. Which, when you incorporate the idea that you have of the ordinary world, if you can add that little extra component of what kind of book is this, I think that's even better. I've noticed that a lot, at least, especially in romance, where it's
That they do it right up
they
front?
say right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the two enemies, so and so and so and so, something like that, just so that those words are there for people that their brain subconsciously goes, oh, I know what this kind of book is. I like this kind of book. Click.
Well, and you talked about bolding, which I want to mention. If you go to the Kindlepreneur website, he has a book description generator where you can put your text in. And if you want to italicize something or bold it or, tweak the size or something. And so then they give you a block with all the HTML built in. So you can upload it on the KDP site and preview it, and it's all done. And this is completely free. So there are a ton of resources out there for authors that are available online at no expense. It's almost like the universe is trying to help you.
Yeah.
Right? When you compare
Yes.
how it was when we started out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I feel like there's just so much information sometimes for newer authors, it's almost overwhelming. So again, I think tips of just try to keep it as simple as possible at first. Like just figure out the bare necessities. And then as you're learning, you're just going to keep adding more and more to your toolbox.
And a lot of new authors don't have the budget for some of the bigger,
Right.
like advertising kinds of things, but you can definitely do some of this just on your own. I have a subscription to BookBrush. I use it for all my A+ content. So if anyone wants to take a look, The Moonlight Child, Wish Upon a Christmas Star, and A Limited Run, which is my new one coming out next month. I did that myself, and I am not a gifted graphic designer, but they make it so easy. And usually when
The templates are all in there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they just really help you out. So, and if you have a book cover designer do the cover for you, I always ask, could I have the cover without the text on it? Because I might want to use it for graphic design.
Oh,
And so that's,
that's a good tip. I've never heard that before. Oh, I just learned something new.
well, and usually they don't mind. In fact, I'm like, well, I'll pay you extra. And they're like, not to worry. I had it anyway. So I don't know if every cover designer will feel that way, but I've been really lucky.
I'm writing this one down.
Are you?
That's
Oh,
great.
good. Glad
I didn't know that.
glad I could help.
I never thought of that before.
Well, like I said, then I use it for my A+ content. So I have the background already, and then I just add the text and then I upload it. So honestly, anybody who's feeling overwhelmed out there, and all of us feel overwhelmed, just do what you can one step at a time. And just think,
Yes.
Karen McQuestion is 61 years old. She's I'm not that tech savvy. I watch a lot of YouTube tutorials and ask a lot of questions of really nice friends. You can do it. Believe me.
Well, and BookBrush, just a shout out to them in general. They have now a trailer template that you can use. They've got just a plug and play for all different kinds of graphics, and and they only cater to authors, so they know exactly what we want, what our pain points are, and they are slowly ticking those off.
Well, I think we're ready to move on to the next one, which is positioning the book. And to me, that's keywords, categories, sending the book off to your review team, all that good stuff, everything you do prior to the book coming out. Now, I have to start out by saying I never had a review team. And I thought, oh, I just don't need one more thing to keep track of. I get overwhelmed and then I talk myself out of things. But then I noticed that my friend Tess Thompson had a book out the same week I had a book out. And I had like 2 reviews and you had like 47. And so then I was right away, I don't know if I texted you or what. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? And do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I was like, I was sort of flattered because I was like, oh, I don't know. I was tickled that you wanted to know how we did that and everything. Yeah.
Well, and this is a really common thing. I had heard other authors talking about it. What you do is you compile a group of people who enjoy your work. And if you're new, people who enjoy your type of book, and you ask them if they want to be on your review team. And the benefits are, at least for me, they get to read the book ahead of time for free. In exchange, they give you an honest review. And very often I share things with them that I don't put on general Facebook, things about what I'm working on, and I also do giveaways just in that group once in a while. And so I'll say I have extra audiobooks. Does anyone in this group want it? Whatever. So, and I just love these readers. So what happened was I needed a group of readers. And I was like, I don't even know how you get started. So if you have a friend who has a reader group and she's very generous, like Tess Thompson, she will say, take you by the hand and go, it's not that scary, Karen. I will add you to my reader group and we'll do a shout out and say, does anyone want to also be in Karen's group? And I would say 3/4 of my group, maybe more, came from your group.
Well, and the key there was I know your books, and I, even though I write more on the romance side, they're similar enough that I was like, I know my readers will love Karen's books if they haven't already read them, which many of them had anyway. But so I think that's key too. If you can kind of target somebody that you think would have similar readers. The other tip you could do, because I know a lot of newbies say, I don't know how to get, reviews and everything. If you let's say you start with a group of 10 readers and they've already said, yeah, I love your books. Ask them, hey, do you have a sister or a best friend or that likes the same kind of books, and would they be interested? Because I think it's up to other, everybody has an individual idea about this, but I kind of like to keep mine at 100 because that's 100 reviews that I know I'll get like in the first couple weeks of a release, which, the more reviews you have, the better it looks to customers and that sort of thing.
That's a good tip, I think, because you can start with a smaller number of reviewers and grow from there. And I have had readers say, I told my friend so-and-so I'm in your group and she would love to join. So that would be my first thing I would say is get yourself a review team. What we do is we set up a Facebook group just for the review team. And, you offer it to them in ebook, which I do through BookFunnel. Do you also do it through BookFunnel?
Yes.
BookFunnel is $20 a year and worth every cent. It's very easy to use. You upload the file and then you give your readers the link and they can access it that way.
Yeah, I think it's just full disclosure. I think it's more than 20 a year. I want to say 100, but I could be wrong because Marianne takes care of all that for me.
Which is another thing. If you get an assistant, which I haven't gotten one, life is much easier. But
yes, yeah, and actually, one of the things you could do if you're starting out and you can't afford an assistant is if you can find some super fans that are kind of the beginning of your review team, one of them might be interested in just volunteering their time to be your admin for that group. Just moderating, letting people in or out or sharing things with them. That is another great way to do it without having to hire somebody. And people are more willing than you would think to do that kind of thing, especially if they're a fan. They're flattered that you would ask.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever give out paperback books ahead of publication?
Not usually, only because I release quickly enough that, usually I don't have the books in stock.
It's not practical.
Especially since, yes, but we always do a contest of some kind, and what we'll say sometimes is, you won't get this paperback until 2 weeks later or something like that, and mostly people are like, oh, that's fine.
And the next thing is that KDP allows you to list keywords and categories. We actually talked about this in detail in a previous podcast. So I think we can gloss over it a little bit and say, if you listen to the podcast I did from rejection to Amazon #1 bestseller, we talked about marketing quite a bit in that one as well. I feel like it's important to use as many categories as you're entitled to, all 10 categories. And something to keep in mind is that your book may be a mystery. You should look beyond that. If it's a mystery that involves a mother and daughter, there might be family-oriented categories that are apropos as well. And that's the case with your romances also.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because, some of mine have mysteries in them, so they can be in kind of, several different types of categories. And the other thing to keep in mind, and I can't remember if we talked about this last time, is sometimes Amazon will add you to categories based on your description. And sometimes you'll get in the wrong category. Like, for example, one of my romances ended up in the sports romance. And yes, he was an ex-football player, but it doesn't have all of the structure of that type of romance. So, just keep an eye on that too, because that can mess up your reviews.
So, and if you're thinking, how do I know what categories I'm in? If you look on the Kindle page and the ASIN, which is the identifying number, if you go to the BK Links site and plug in the identifying number, it will show you all the categories that your book is in. And I will put a link to that site in the show notes. And again, it's free. Someone just did it to be helpful to authors. It's just amazing how much is out there that we can use.
Absolutely.
Tools for us to use. You can also do pre-order alerts with the website BookBub. Have you done that?
Yeah, I do that for every release, absolutely. And that price structure is just based on how many followers you have. So it can be pretty inexpensive, depending on how many followers you have over on BookBub.
My books are in Kindle Unlimited, which is Amazon's subscription-based service like Netflix for books. But you had said at one time that you thought for some genres, it's better not to be exclusive. It's better to go wide.
Yeah. Well, and I have always been wide my whole career until just the beginning of this year. I put everything into KU, and I have found that to be very, very useful for my type of book. I think most of them are in KU, and I was fighting against that, especially with a price point of $4.99. It's, not super high, but it's not $2.99. So I think, really think about where your customers read their books. For example, over on Apple, I don't think price point is much of an issue. So that might factor into your decision about whether or not you do KU. I think also standalones do better wide than they would in KU, because with KU, if you can hook them into a book that is part of a series, then you've got all those page reads following up. But if it's a standalone, it might make better sense for it to be wide. But it just depends too, like we said, on the genre.
And then tagging on to what you said about page reads, we should explain that if somebody takes your book out in Kindle Unlimited, the author gets paid by how many pages are read. So if somebody just reads 100 pages and stops partway through, that's what the author is compensated for. So someone could download your book in Kindle Unlimited, but if they don't read the book for 2 months, you don't get paid until they actually read it. Is that the way you understand it as well?
Yes, although they are kind of a little bit mysterious about how they do the rankings. Again, where nobody knows, really. It's the secret.
They're mysterious about a lot of things over there.
They are. Yeah.
Love to crack open the Amazon secret box and see what's going on there. Well, now the third P is promotion, which is actually really marketing. I used to think they were kind of interchangeable, but I was corrected by someone who said, no, marketing is everything that's done in-house if you're with a big publisher. And promotion is the outreach they do to get like the author on a TV show or to get a magazine to review the book. But for my purposes, I just feel like I'm promoting my book, and I just call it all promotion. So most of the ads people talk about are on Facebook and Amazon. Some people have talked about advertising on Google. Have you done that at all?
I have not. I have not heard really good things about it from authors, that it's not really worth the time or money. The other avenue I've used a lot is BookBub ads, and those are especially useful for targeting readers in your subgenre, because you can choose authors to target. It's like everybody is available, whereas as most people know, Facebook, there's only the really big authors are available to target. So that one I feel, and everybody on the BookBub list is a reader. So they're looking for bargain books anyway. So I find that one to be pretty useful.
So we should backtrack. Those who aren't familiar with BookBub, it's a email newsletter that they send out that tells books that are featured, discounted, free, on sale. And you can sign up and specify what types of books you're interested in. So if you can get featured on their newsletter and authors pay to have a spot, you're going to go out directly to the readers that are looking for exactly your kind of book.
And they're excited because it's on sale or whatever. Yeah, and it's if you're really new, you might not know that BookBub featured deals are different than BookBub ads.
Yes.
Anyone can do an ad, whereas with a featured deal, you have to apply, and they're very hard to get. They say they only accept 20% of them. And it may be even lower than that because it's so popular, and they're not cheap. It's a sizable, and we could do a whole episode on BookBub featured deals. There's a lot of complexity to it, but in general, if you can get one, they usually really boost your sales, especially if you have a series. If you can get the first one featured, it's really good.
Now, the ads, the one that anyone can get, are down at the bottom of the newsletter. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes. So if you're buying an ad space, it's the bidding, just like Amazon and Facebook ads are. You're basically saying, I'll spend X amount per click or X amount per views. And when you choose your targets, they then show your ad to people who either follow that author or who like that kind of book, etc. So the algorithms in BookBub basically kind of figure that out. Like it goes, so like I see a lot of advertisements on the newsletter at the bottom. It's just a little square for sweet romance because I like that kind of book. And they know that because I have clicked on when I go in as a user, like I want to see these types of books. So I think BookBub ads are definitely worth experimenting with. And, you can just put $5 a day and see which targets work and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of people who know a lot more about BookBub ads than I do. David Cochran has a great section on his website, I'm pretty sure, about BookBub ads. And then there's books, I'm not an expert by any means, but they have been fairly useful for me. I have found them to be the best for either free or 99-cent books. Because again, people who subscribe to that newsletter are looking for bargains.
I got in trouble doing a BookBub ad. Did I ever tell you this story? I did an ad and the book was free to read for Prime members. It was in Prime Reading. And I put that on the graphic, the book cover, and then free in all capital letters. And it did phenomenally well. I mean, I was just overjoyed with the click-through rate. And, and about on the 6th day, I got an email from BookBub saying they had a complaint that it was not free. And I was like, but it was free for people with Prime members. And
but people didn't understand
they were like,
that
no.
part.
They felt like I was misrepresenting. So they didn't say you're barred from ever advertising with us again. They were like, yes, we understand that, but would never put something in our newsletter that might cause confusion or alienate a reader. Yeah. And I was like, no. Who is out there that's so petty that they're going to go to the trouble to complain because they clicked on something? But okay, I understand. So that was...
Yeah, well, and I have noticed even on the featured deals, like let's say I looked at yesterday's newsletter today and I clicked on a book I was excited about and it's already back to full price. That happens sometimes too. And I think sometimes books go back to regular price because Amazon's matching something else. Like a lot of times it's happening and we're not even sure why. So it is another little tip is just to keep an eye on your prices all the time, because they're constantly messed up, it seems like.
Well, and if your book
But
is no longer free,
especially
then you
if
want
you're
to kill that ad, because you don't want to
Exactly.
people, going and finding that's not the case. Don't be a
Right.
Karen McQuestion.
yeah, don't be a Karen.
Nope, you don't want to do that. Now, social media is another way that people get the word out about their books. And I know on my review team, I have 50 some, you said you have 100. Even if 2/3 of them post that they read that book and enjoyed it, and they have X number of friends and people share it, that can be a really powerful driver, a good way to get the visibility.
And especially for those of you who are on the newer side, one thing that I have found over the years is that people really want to help. Like if you say, you know what, you guys, it's so competitive right now with all these books. Would you mind sharing this with your friends and family? They're like, sure, I'll do that. So keep that in mind too, that there are some cheaper ways to get your book in front of people without having to spend tons of money on ads.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was always afraid to ask people to share. Like, oh, she's pushing her book and being
Same,
obnoxious.
yeah.
And it turned out that all you have to do is say, if you're so inclined, I'd really appreciate it. And people are like, oh, no problem. And I'm like, really?
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely.
easy? All you have to do is ask?
I know. Well, and one thing I will say is that I think it's really tempting, especially when you're new and you're so excited about your first book or your second, it is to only post about that like constantly. Oh, my book. And that will definitely burn even your mom out. Mm-hmm. Like they want to know a little more about you than just buy my book. So keep that in mind too. Like don't go crazy with it. But Karen and I think, aired on the other side of never asking because we didn't want to seem pushy, I guess is the word, right?
Well, and as far as that buy my book kind of thing goes, I think what sometimes I see with newer authors is they feel like they're selling their book, selling a product. But in fact, what you want to say, and this is all just sort of turning it around and looking at it on the other side, is you're not selling a book. You don't say it's a story about secrets, because I'm like, oh, we all have secrets. You know what I mean? What you're selling is an experience. That's what people want to know. They want to know, is it going to be an edge of my seat thriller? Am I going to get the feelings I got when I first fell in love? Is it going to, whatever it is, tell them what the experience is going to be rather than what the story is. Because we get so caught up going, well, then she has to go live with her uncle. And one day she goes up to the attic. And well, when you're first starting out, you're like,
absolutely.
And people are like, oh, I don't care. I don't know this person. I don't know about her uncle. I don't know about the attic. But if you say, oh, it's going to be comparable to this person's books, or it's going to be this experience.
Or it's going to scare the you-know-what out of you or whatever. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you're like, what am I in the mood for? Mm-hmm. It's like that description, this is good, kind of goes back to the first P, but that description tells them whether it's a cheese pizza or a pepperoni pizza or a milkshake or whatever. And I mean, I am a kind of an eclectic reader, so I read all kinds of things. And sometimes I want something a little deeper, or that's more on the literary fiction side, let's just say, just because I enjoy really good writing. And then some days I'm like, I do not want anything depressing. I just want that feel-good read that's going to make me laugh or make me smile or, touch me or whatever. So the easier you make it to tell people what your book is, then they can order it if they're in the mood. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh,
or am I
sure.
just babbling?
No, absolutely. And another thing, when you post something about your book on Facebook, I've seen this so many times, like, guys, my book is now out in audio or whatever. Always put a link. Always, always, always. Make it easy for people to follow up and check it out and hopefully buy it, because we have such limited attention spans. For me to leave that post and go elsewhere and look it up, and it's too many steps.
Yeah, and although you do have to be careful with that about links on your regular Facebook profile, what I always do is say link is in the first comment, because that can get you in trouble with Facebook because they want you to pay for advertising.
Yeah, and then you'll go to Facebook jail.
Yes.
Do you know about that, Tess?
Oh, yes, I've been to Facebook jail. Well, not for my profile, but they didn't like something about my ads. It was during one of the political cycles, and I never have been able to get my account back. I had to open a different one.
And what was it? I mean, you never post anything political. So
God, no. Yeah, I hate politics. Well, my very smart friend Kelly Coates Gilbert said that she thinks they were flagging anything that had any sort of thing that could reference an election. And mine had the state of Colorado in it in the description because Emerson Pass is in Colorado. And she thought that might have, it's not real people doing this, it's their system. And so it was looking for, words that they thought could be suspicious. That was something she thought, and she's always really smart about that kind of thing. So I thought that could be it, but nobody knows. And then, some of the more kind of steamy romances, they get in trouble sometimes because they think the graphics are too racy. I mean, there's so many reasons you can get into trouble. So just try to be as careful as you can so you don't go to Facebook jail.
It hasn't happened to me yet. Now watch, now that I said it. It's in my future now. I'm jinxed. Well, now everyone knows the newest things in social media is TikTok, which you are on TikTok, and you had a post that got an uptick, and you really did see a little boost in sales, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I have a firm who does mine. Just full disclosure, I don't do TikTok because another tip I have for people is once you start making some money, you have to decide what makes me the most money. And what makes me the most money is putting books out every couple months and hiring other people to do something like TikTok, which would take me a lot of time that I don't want to spend doing it. And I can't think of anything anyway. I'm not clever and I'm old. So I have 2 young ladies doing mine that are super clever. So one of mine did well. It was for one of my contemporary romances. And I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing because it had like 60,000 views or something. A lot for me. I know these people go viral. It's way more than that. But it all of a sudden was showing up on the top 100 in its subcategory. Well, that same period of time, I did some promotional newsletters. So like Fussy Librarian and e-reader, there's I call them baby book bubs. It's basically the same concept. Anyway, a couple of those happened around the same time. So I don't know sometimes because I'm doing so many things. I'm doing advertising. I'm doing these newsletters. I'm doing, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all these things at once. So it's hard sometimes to pinpoint exactly what's working. And that is frustrating because you want to know so that you can put your time and energy and money into those things. So that's my only caveat, I would say, is that sometimes you're not really sure why something is suddenly doing better than it was before.
And if you're listening to Tess and you're getting overwhelmed, don't be, because I'm getting overwhelmed listening to you. And there are a couple different approaches. You can do as much or as little as makes sense to you or that you feel equipped to do. And then you start layering. I mean, if you have an ad that's running well, I will just let it run and I'll just check on it periodically. And that's 5 minutes a day. So I might say, well, I have ads on Facebook and Amazon, and I also have, X, Y, and Z, but it's not as if I'm spending the majority of the day doing those things.
Right. Well, yeah. And I also will say it's only been like 2 or 3 years, and I've been doing this for over 10, that I figured out a bunch of this business stuff. Like I just was like, I just have to write great books and they'll get discovered. Well, no, that is not how it works. And you're the one that said to me, nobody can read a book they can't find. So I think, yes, take everything one step at a time and just kind of grow it and keep adding, like I said, tools to your toolkit as you go along. And the other thing I would say is listen to every podcast about indie publishing. This is for the indie groups. Go to David Gaughran's site, go to Brian Cohen's site. There are all these people out there who have done a bunch of work over the years and made tools for us. And everything you need to know is out there. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's astounding. There is a wonderful Facebook group called 20 Books to 50K. And I don't know, there's like 60,000 members. And they're all indie authors. And the whole premise behind it is if you can write 20 books, which if you've only written your first book, that just sounds impossible. But believe me, if you just keep at it eventually, and each one sells moderately well, it doesn't have to be a blockbuster, that you can eventually make $50,000 a year. Well, there are people on this website that post that are making $1 million a year, people you've never heard of before. There are thousands that are making in the six figures. It's just astounding. But they're so generous. I mean, all the information is there. If you do a search on this Facebook page for something like categories, TikTok, keywords, launch strategies, somebody has asked it already and the information is out there. And they're so generous and so sharing. Occasionally they'll do a post where someone will go, why isn't my book selling? And everyone will chime in and give them feedback about what they could do. There is so much out there.
Yeah. And if you're willing to learn and be humble enough to get feedback and all that, it'll just keep adding to your skill set for sure. The other Facebook group I wanted to shout out is Indie Inspiration with Elena Johnson. That's another one. She is amazing. We've had her on as guest. I have a huge girl crush on her. She's amazing. She has also written some great marketing books that if you look up Elena Johnson on Amazon, you'll find them all. She does a what's working post every couple weeks, asking advice on a cover. I mean, just everything that you want to know, she has either written a post herself or somebody else has in there. So that's another one.
Another podcast that we should mention is Sarah and Jamie's podcast.
Yes.
The Wish I'd Known Then for writers. We had Sarah Rosette on a couple weeks ago on our podcast, and they ask authors, what do you know now that you wish you had known when you had started out? And so there's just a wealth. They've been doing it for a couple of years.
Yeah, and they're fantastic. Yeah, we had Jamie Albright on early.
Also,
when we first started, and I've known her for a couple of years. They are great. The podcast I loved, which was the Six Figures Authors, they have retired it, but I believe you can still go back and listen to the archives, and they had a lot of really interesting guests. And then if you haven't heard of her, which would be surprising unless you're really new, is Joanna Penn. She has been doing a podcast for I think it's 10 years, and it's just oriented toward indie authors, and it's fantastic. And that's another one where if you just look at the archives, she does what we do and kind of gives you a hint on what the highlights of the interview are. So that's another resource to go with.
Now, a lot of indie authors swear by newsletters. So, you have a space on your website where people can sign up to hear about new releases or get updates. And I have to admit, that's not a strong suit for me.
Yeah, I've been working on my newsletter growth for, probably 4 or 5 years. And I personally like the kind of slow growing organic where you're really gathering readers who are interested in hearing from you. But everyone says one of the most important things you can do is gather those addresses in that you own from your website and your newsletter, because social media is always changing. We never know when something that was free is now going to be charged. So I think the idea is that you are then in control of that list, and you can tell them every time you have a sale, every time you have a release, and so forth. Yeah,
it's your way to connect directly with readers. So if you're thrown into Facebook jail or whatever, you still have the resource available. I just recently did a giveaway with King Sumo, which I had only just heard about. Sometimes I hear about things and people, I'll mention it like it's this like revelation, and people be like, oh yeah, I've been using that for months. I feel like, why did no one tell me? But it's a company that will basically host a giveaway for you. And they do all the work of people enter and they agree to get marketing from you. I'm not explaining it very well, Tess. You jump and help me.
Well, I actually have a limited understanding of it too, because this is another thing that my assistant does for me. Oh. Yeah, which I don't recommend not knowing what people are doing for you, because what happens, if they suddenly are like, I am no longer working for you because you're too much of a, ding dong.
I don't think that'll ever happen with Marianne.
Yeah, hopefully not. But yeah, just look up King Sumo app. If you Google that, you'll find them. Yeah.
And you pay, I believe it was $49. And don't be intimidated by app. You can do it on your laptop or your desktop. And what happens is they give you a link, and I put it on Facebook. I asked people to share it, and I did a giveaway, and then, a couple hundred people entered the giveaway, and they were automatically added to my newsletter. And of course they can unsubscribe at any time, but they were interested in winning the books. So therefore, hopefully they would be potential readers. I also am a huge fan of Goodreads giveaways, and some people don't use them at all. Do you use?
I do them almost every.
Oh,
every
do you
book,
really?
yeah.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that about you.
Here's something interesting. Mary Ann, my assistant, we keep talking about her. She went to a seminar by Alexandra
Okay.
Torres.
Okay.
I'm probably saying her name wrong. I'm sorry, but she's the Inkers Con organizer and founder, and she's amazing. She does all kinds of different. That's another great resource for new or aspiring authors. She does a whole workshop on how to use Goodreads to find more readers. And one of the things she suggests is to do the giveaways. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years maybe. But again, Mary Ann was like, I think I took this seminar and I think you should do this. I'm like, okay.
Now, if you have a limited budget, this is probably not something you want to do because it is $119 for them to host the giveaway. And if you're giving away paperback books, that's on you. So you still have to package up the books and mail them out, or however you get books out. Some people send them directly from a retailer, but I usually sign them and mail them. And if you give away Kindle books, they will give away 100 of them. So in theory, you're getting more books to more readers, but I think that you get fewer people signing up for the giveaway, and it's easy to forget about a book that's on your Kindle. It's not as easy to forget about one that's sitting on your nightstand or your end table. That's just kind of my take on it.
Alexandra Torres has a whole seminar on this, and there's all kinds of benefits to doing the giveaways because one of the things is everybody who enters then goes on their, I'm not currently reading, but I'm going to read such and such. And so then it shows up more. So that's another reason to do it. But again, I'm not the expert on this Goodreads thing, but there are people who are.
And this is one of those things where you can't actually quantify, is it selling books? I think it's a great tool. The thing I like about it is, as you said, the people who enter, they added the book to their shelf. Is that how you put it? And
Yes.
Other people who are their friends will see that. And it's so you're getting more eyes on the book cover, which is greater visibility. But also, because Amazon owns Goodreads, it looks like, oh, this book is suddenly popular. A lot of people are adding it to their shelf. So I have done giveaways for books that are 5-6 years old. And then I'll get an email from Amazon saying we're putting it in a promotion. And I'll be like, oh, isn't that interesting? 3 months after I did a giveaway. I don't know if there's a direct correlation, but I tend to think there is. I don't know. All I know is that, and then people are very happy to win the books. Very often they will post on social media. It all kind of goes from there. I think that I've exhausted all of my marketing tips. I don't have any secrets. I mean, I think people sometimes feel like you're holding out on them. You just start with a good book and you package it, hopefully in a way that's compelling, and try to position it correctly, and then just promote the hell out of it.
Yeah, and whatever your budget is, figure out what you could do. If you've got $200, then, try to figure out the best way to spend that money. The other thing I wanted to mention really quickly, and I'm sure this is obvious to everybody, but with Amazon, with the sneak peek, what do they call it?
Look inside the book, is that it?
Look inside the book, yeah. That is your opportunity for the last selling point, and that is to have an opening that people cannot turn away from. And we have very short attention spans these days. We're not in the time of Dickens or Thomas Hardy when you can have 5 pages of description before anything happens. Pull that reader in immediately, and you just have a better chance if your opening is really tight. So
for my Kindle books, I put like other books by Karen McQuestion at the end of the book. What would traditionally be called front matter, I put it to the back matter so that when people look inside the book, they don't get hung up on those extra things. They can go straight to the story. You're nodding. You do that as well?
Yeah, and actually, this is another thing I could be wrong about, but I thought that Kindle, if you have front matter, it automatically sends the reader to the first chapter. I could be wrong about that, but I thought that was true, that it has like an automatic thing where it goes to chapter 1.
That would make sense, wouldn't you think? Because there's the copyright page and the dedication and the title, so if you can look at a sample, you don't want to read all that extra stuff. You want to know what you're getting.
Exactly.
Well, it has been delightful talking shop with you,
Yes.
Tess Thompson.
We could talk about this stuff all day. If anybody listening has a subject that they want us to go into more depth on, or a guest that they're interested in hearing more from, let us know, because we're always open to suggestions. And, we just have fun talking about this stuff, but we also genuinely want to help, especially because we know how hard it is when you're first starting out. It's just, everything seems so overwhelming. And I can remember a friend kind of going through, okay, you need to do this and this and this. And I thought at the end of the conversation, I don't think I can do indie publishing. I'm not smart enough. I don't know how to do it. So the resources are out there. I think that's the main thing we wanted to say.
And you can do it. Honestly, we did it.
Yes.
Yes. No geniuses here.
No, and the other thing to think about too is okay, you can get overwhelmed. No, there's so many books. However, there are, even for small subgenres, there's a niche of people out there who want your book, that there's enough readers to go around, and they're looking for your book right now because that's what they want. So as long as you can give that to, tell them, hey, this is what this is, so that then they can find you, the better chance you have.
People can't read a book they don't know about. So that's your
Exactly.
job. Find them. They're out there.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Karen, for your 3 Ps, and I hope this was helpful to everybody. Again, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. They hope you found it entertaining and informative. If you loved it, tell your friends. And if you have a moment, they'd love for you to post a star rating or review. This has been Behind the Book.